From Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and the studios of 850 AM WFTL, this is Outlaw, America's alternative voice. Streaming around the world at outlawshow.com. This week, Help Me Outlaw. We're joined by Broward County's lead public defender, Howard Finkelstein. Your host for Outlaw, attorney, political leader, and equal rights activist, Dean Trantalis.
Welcome back to Outlaw. This is Dean Trantalis, America's alternative voice. Our guest this evening is the well-known and ever-famous Howard Finkelstein, who's Chief Public Defender for Broward County. Welcome again, Howard.
Thanks, Dean.
You alluded in the first half of the show to moments in time in which the Sheriff's Department at that time, like in the 1980s, proactively went after the gay community, members of the gay community, through arrests, intimidation, and the like. And you felt that at the time there didn't seem to be a reaction from the gay community. It's at that time that an organization was formed called GUARD, Gays United Against Discrimination and Recrimination, or Recrimination Discrimination. And there was a fellow named Dennis Delia and others who made the attempt to, through a grassroots effort, to try to react to what was happening at that time, and it gave the gay community a sense of relief that at least we have someone out there fighting, yelling, screaming, and that's exactly what Dennis Delia used to do.
Absolutely.
Right? He was a firebrand.
Yes, he was.
And we needed someone like him at that time, and he made a lot of noise, got a lot of people's attention, and I think it gave the community overall a sense of relief that there wasn't just one voice that was there terrorizing individuals. Because I know the African American community also started to feel uncomfortable knowing that this unbridled license which the sheriff at that time took to attack people was really felt throughout the community, and I'm sure through your practice, especially amongst the poor and the disenfranchised, this sense of fear from our own police department was certainly not a good thing.
It not only was not a good thing, what made it mean-spirited was it was done for political reasons, too.
Right.
So on the backs of people's lives that they were destroying, they were going to get an extra 100 votes or 200 votes. And when I say lives destroyed, it was a very different time. And all of a sudden, when you got outed for being gay, it meant you maybe lost your job, maybe where you lived, maybe, your friends. It was a dramatic impact on people's lives. Today, well, yes, there still is not a complete joining of the gay and the straight communities. Back then, there was a reviling, and all of a sudden, you're going through your life, and all you did was go out one night, and the next thing you know, you not only have been turned upside down, your life as you know it has just ended, and to do that for a few cheap political points was really something that, for many years, I used to give ex-Sheriff Navarro a lot of crap for whenever I would see him. And I believe he evolved as a person over the years. I don't really know.
I never knew him.
But I always believe that anybody that doesn't get, when you're an adult, you should be able to get the lessons your mother taught you,
right,
which is to go into the world and treat people nicely. That's it. Just be nice to people. You don't hurt people, you don't hit them, you don't kick them, and yet it seemed those rules didn't apply if straight people wanted to bash, literally or figuratively, gay people. And that's why I think people like you, Dean, and this radio show, this is an incredibly wonderful thing, and it's an important thing that the gay community feels that it has not just a voice, has many voices, has power, that you have arrived. And like I said earlier, if you want to be president of the United States, you got to come, and you got to come to Wilton Manors, and you got to talk to people who are influential in the gay and the community at large, and it just does my heart good to see finally 30 some odd years later that people finally are coming to an understanding.
Well, and eventually Sheriff Navarro's own party turned him out. He lost his primary, and a new administration took over. I believe it was Ron Cochran. Was he
Yes.
was he the successor?
Yes.
And a totally different tone took place, and I think that was that signaled the evolution and the change within our community, is its attitude towards the gay, lesbian, and the African American population. Because again, I feel that the African American population still remains a target of law enforcement in a disproportionate way.
You will see an article coming out either this weekend or the following weekend exactly proving what you just said. Most of us who have done this work for the last 30 years have known that if you are black and you're driving a car, that's probable cause to stop you. What most people didn't know is that there's also a crime in Broward County, specifically Fort Lauderdale, for walking while black. And it took my investigators, who are ex-Fort Lauderdale police, using some of the technology that the police use themselves. You are going to see an article which proves what we have all known for a long time.
So there's profiling just in being
That's just
black.
that simple. Just being black.
Because I know that also riding a bike.
Yes. How about, and this most people didn't know, because I've done this for a long time, did you know that if you walk in the street, it's a crime?
Walk into the street.
If you walk on the street.
Right.
Well, they're arresting many black people in Fort Lauderdale for walking on the street, but there aren't any sidewalks. What's the alternative?
Right.
Walk in the air? Did you know that there are many black people that get charged for walking on the street in the wrong direction? That unless you are walking against the traffic, you can be stopped.
This is in which city?
Fort Lauderdale.
Fort Lauderdale.
And
We definitely have too many police officers if this is where we're targeting our law enforcement.
And what happens is it's really a pretextual stop. They're black. They're in a black neighborhood. I think he's got drugs, so we need a basis to stop him. They stop him, they search him, and if they find drugs, they file the charges.
Has this met constitutional challenges?
It's in the process of doing it now, and like I said, you will read about it either this weekend or the next weekend in the Sun Sentinel. It's taken us a couple of years to gather this data, but we're bringing it home, and what we hope out of this is not so much that police officers get charged with a crime. It's time to end the culture. And what people don't really remember about Fort Lauderdale, when you study the pernicious racism of the South, understand that Fort Lauderdale was part of that. That to be black in Fort Lauderdale, you couldn't go to the beach. If you went to the other side of the railroad tracks, you weren't coming back unless a police officer arrested you. So a lot of the perniciousness is at the bottom of a culture that still allows two standards of justice. That if you're poor and black, make no mistake about it, you do not get the same quality of justice or law enforcement as you do if you're moneyed and white.
And I think to some extent the gay community falls into that trap because the simmering prejudice that exists within the hearts and minds of people in Fort Lauderdale hasn't really been completely disgorged from the psyche of who we are here. And I see that in politics, in my own politics. I see that in everyday life. I see that, for example, I always wonder who's appointed to boards of directors of big corporations that are located here in Fort Lauderdale. You very rarely see an outreach to members of the minority community. It's all really white, mainstream white men.
Right. No, look, America's tarnish. And I love this country. There is no place that is even close to the wonderfulness that the United States of America is. But the fundamental or original sin for the United States is slavery and racism. And all you have to do is look at the thing. When you talk to people who tell you they're proud to be an American, ask them why. The answers are very different depending who you're talking to, black, white, Cuban, Jew. But there is one thing from which our pride comes, and it's a simple, simple statement, and we all know it. And it's this: we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
But even those who wrote those words had slaves.
They had slaves, but those words were to appeal to the higher human self. And when Americans read those words and don't get the fact that what it says, for the first time we built a nation, not for a race, not for a religion, and not for a people, for all races, all religions, and all people. In other words, which part of all men are created equal don't you get?
Well, it doesn't seem to apply to women, because women have never been able to achieve that level of equality that the Constitution, as you say, should afford them. I mean, we've never had an equal rights amendment that would pass.
Well, think about that. How could anyone be against an equal rights amendment? I don't care if it's equal rights for women, equal rights for blacks, equal rights for San Salvadorians.
Because you're interfering with your own. There's a perception that you're going to take away the rights you've achieved by sharing them with others.
Well, there are two types of people. There are the type of people that view others as an extension of themselves,
Right.
and then there's the second group which view other people as someone to be afraid of and to protect yourself from.
Right.
There is plenty of sun for everyone. There's plenty of America for everyone. The more everyones we have, the better we all are.
Well, you say that, but unfortunately, those who feel like they have a sort of competitive disadvantage for whatever reason. They don't feel smart enough. They don't feel pretty enough. They don't feel rich enough. There's always that person down the block or at work who may have some potential that the person having these feelings is scared of and feels threatened by. So, as you said earlier in the program, there's a sense within many people to put others down, and because of the competition within our society, and one way to put people down is through prejudice.
It's always been that way, and that's why when you get to know the group of people you don't like, that you hate, that you're prejudiced against, you watch it disappear. Prejudice can only exist in the dark recesses of our mind. When it's shown up to the light, when you meet a person who's gay or black, what you see is they're like me.
Right.
They want a good life. They want a better life for their children. They want to be treated with dignity, respect. There's no difference.
Tell us a little bit about the public defender's office. You obviously represent indigent individuals. Those are the only people that qualify for you to represent. But I don't think indigency necessarily is just represented by a single group, a single racial group, or a single ethnic group. Obviously, it goes across the board.
Across the board, all races, all ethnicities.
And sexual orientations, I would imagine.
Yes.
So your office has represented gay and lesbians in the defense of any criminal allegations that have been made against them.
Oh, for years and years.
For years and years. And what kind of criminal allegations are we often talking about? Is it just the everyday, is it burglary? Is it speeding? Is it sex offenses on the beach? What are we talking about?
Every now and then you'll see some crackdown where they'll go for, what they call anonymous public sex. We don't see that often. When it comes to gays and lesbians, it's the run-of-the-mill crimes of straight people: possession of cocaine, possession of barbiturates, possession of ecstasy, occasionally a burglary, and maybe I'll be faulted for this, but basically the gay community is a very moral, well-behaved community. You don't have a lot of gay guys riding down the street with a shotgun and a gun about to rip your necklace off and blow your head off. It just doesn't happen that often. But any community's got its ne'er-do-wells and its good people. But bottom line, with most gays and lesbians, it's just your run-of-the-mill drug cases, maybe a DUI case, maybe a theft here or there. Where we do see it a lot, there was domestic violence. But no more so than you see in heterosexual relationships. In the very beginning, the courts didn't know quite how to deal with that. What do you mean it's domestic violence and it's two guys? Well, if you look at it, what's the difference if it's two guys, two women, a guy and a girl, a girl?
They didn't know how to handle it.
It's all, you're not allowed to hit people.
Well, it's funny.
It's really simple. You can't hit people.
It's funny you say that, because I represented an individual, a well-known individual in our community, who was in a relationship, and there was domestic violence in their relationship, and they wanted to separate themselves and move on. But there was the issue of domestic violence, and it was between an older and a younger person. It was the older person committing domestic violence on the younger person. So I represented the younger person at that time, and it was in front of a circuit court judge, and the judge, who shall remain nameless, didn't know how to handle the issue. He looked at me. As soon as I started to make my presentation, he stopped the proceedings. He said, "Go out in the hallway and figure out what you're going to do. I don't want to hear this." I looked at my client looked at me, all of us looked at each other and said, what is that about? And that was my first introduction to the lack of sensitivity that these judges had, at least this particular judge had, with regard to how to deal with same-sex situations. Now, I believe that this judge has eventually become more educated about it and certainly knows how to handle things better. But was that a case of first impression for this judge? Maybe so.
You know, in most cases, it's just an example of stupidity and ignorance. And, you know, there are a lot of people that are judges. There are a lot of people who are judges in Broward County that really should have learned a lot more before they became a judge and started to decide that they could make judgments about people. The judiciary is far better today than it has ever been at any time in the past. When I started 33 years ago, we had overt racists on the bench that used the N-word, the F-word, and had no qualms about it. I can't tell you how many times I'd walk in representing someone charged with murder in the first degree, and Judge Daniel Futch, a man who should be reviled, would look at me and say, "How can this be murder one, Howard? He just killed a faggot." And I would sit there and go, "Your Honor?" This was in a courtroom. This wasn't in a hallway or in a bar. And there was an attitude amongst some that the worth of a gay life wasn't the same as a heterosexual life. That's just outrageous ignorance. But when it comes from a judge who has the ability to inflict pain or to relieve pain, then it's not acceptable. So our judges have learned. We have a much better bench today. Gay people are much more accepted. There's much more known about it. But really, if you think about it, this is not a complicated issue. Domestic violence is about one person hitting another. It doesn't make a difference whether they're male or female and whether the victim is male or female.
Well, do you think that Judge Futch probably represented a cultural norm that existed at that time or prior to his tenure that certainly has evolved and changed over the years? I mean, he wasn't the only one thinking that.
No, he wasn't the only one. He was the one that was the most bombastic and overt about it. But no, there was the nod and the wink. And I'll even tell you about something that happened, it wasn't that many years ago, right here in Broward, where we had a case where it was an older man charged with raping I think a 17-year-old boy, and something comes up, the jury's not there, and they're talking about the fact that the boy, 17, used to play football. And one of the lawyers says, "Oh, I wonder if he was a wide receiver." Right. And they start yucking it up.
I remember that.
And you sit there and you go, wait a second, this kid was raped. You know, this isn't about being gay or straight. Rape, I think, can't we all agree that rape is wrong and bad? And once we've agreed to that, does it really matter which part of the body is penetrated? I don't think so.
Well, that mentality often exists even in heterosexual situations, often condemning or demonizing the woman who, if she were raped, saying things like, "Oh, she probably deserved it. Look at the way she dresses. You know, what's her history? You know, and that kind of attitude, unfortunately, has spilled over into the gay context. And so, in a sense, I want to actually talk about law enforcement and. Do you find that there are any law enforcement departments that make an extra effort to target the members of the gay community? Do they, for example, is drug enforcement targeted more in the gay community than, say, in the straight community at large?
I don't think so.
Because there are stories about that.
Yeah, I've heard them. I don't know. I think that, where you'll see it is they might target a particular bar. They might target a particular area where they think drugs are going. I think it's more the target of drugs than the gay population. Although each police department's a little bit different. Will Manor's police department's probably going to have a whole different attitude than the Davie Police Department. And I just picked those two. I mean, it could be others. I don't think that there's a overt conspiracy to get gay people now. There are police officers that are out there in their police cars and on the beat that very much want to get gay people, that don't very much like gay people, that believe that they're doing God's work by inflicting pain on gay people. That's more a cultural issue. While we have grown and evolved as a community, law enforcement has too, but they're still a little bit behind. You know, generally as agencies and as a profession, they are going to be a little bit behind the curve, and they're far more advanced than they were 10 years ago. And in another 10 years, they won't be quite as backwards as they are right now.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because I had a personal experience in this regard. I would say within the last 4 years, 3 complete strangers came to my office, and they asked if they could speak with me. So my door is always open, as my slogan says, open door, open mind. So we sat down, and they said, you know, Dean, we've never met before, but I just want you to know that I've been charged with dealing with drugs, and your name came up. And I said, really? How did my name come up? Well, the investigator kept hammering me, saying, you're dealing with drugs. Did you ever? And it wasn't like, was it any public official? Was it any? I don't know. They specifically would say, did you ever sell to Dean Trantalis? And they were even offered lighter sentences.
Right.
If they would confess or fabricate their story to implicate me. And this happened on 3 separate occasions.
Right.
And I brought this to the attention of the chief of police of Fort Lauderdale, who denied that that conduct or that practice happened.
It happens all the time, Dave.
It happens all the time. I know. And so that's why I'm saying, so personally, I feel that there is that members of the gay community are targeted, and the point, I guess, I'm trying to make is that I think that there are certain elements, and I'd like to think perhaps renegade elements within law enforcement, that are looking to bring down the gay community or bring down the African American community by targeting a public figure within that group. And if they could bring that person down, then they have now diminished who they are as a people. And to me, that is a clear and conscious attempt to undermine the equal rights of people that you have so eloquently just spoken about this evening.
I've had the same experience that you just described on numerous occasions. People will come to me and say, well, the police were really, really leaning on me to tell them that I sold you drugs, or that I did. Right, me, Howard Finkelstein. And I think a lot of that has more to do with being a public figure. But underneath that, yes, there are many, and I don't know the numbers, that are out there that would like to bring the gay community down, want to bring the black community down. And then there are still many other police officers that are just angry people and want to bring down anybody that they can, because, misery loves company, and if they are miserable wretches, they can't stand the fact that you got a smile on your face, you got a radio show, you got a successful practice, you were elected to office. So I think there's a lot of those elements. And remember, law enforcement is generally going to be more conservative, and we've only seen recently where people who were gay could serve openly in law enforcement and the military. You would have thought we would have crossed this bridge a long time ago. I'm grateful we're crossing it now, but we really need to get across that bridge already.
And I agree, and the way to do it, of course, is to try to permeate society at every level. In the various shows that we've had here on WFTL, we've talked about the religious community, we've talked about the political community, as well as the social community, and how members of the gay and lesbian community can certainly change the attitude. And the best way to do that, of course, is to be out and to not coil from that position of who you are. And if you do, then you've actually kind of sort of said to myself, well, I'm retreating from who I am as a person. Perhaps you're right, being gay isn't all that good, and so I'm going to try to blend in and not self-identify as being a gay person. And of course, that kind of retreat is the death of who people are in terms of the LGBT community. Your daughter certainly wouldn't do that, and any of her friends certainly wouldn't do that. We did have a show here a few weeks back in which members of the Gay Straight Alliance from Nova University were here, Nova Southeastern, and And there were two women who, there was one woman, who was the president of that group, and she spoke very eloquently and very straightforwardly about her sexual orientation. She was a young girl, and I applauded her for that, because I have to say that when I became a lawyer here in my late 20s, the first thing I did was I bought a Brooks Brothers suit, because it was a way to kind of blend in and not be, not stand out, because the prejudice was there, especially within the bar. And but we've changed that. How do we change that? By speaking out and speaking up, and people like you, Howard, who have spoken on our behalf, and who continue to do so, because it's these everyday experiences, not the ones that always make the headlines, and not all the ones that have cataclysmic change, but the incremental change. And I think that what people don't understand is that you have been part of our community, a chief component in creating change that has helped not just the gay community, but you've helped change the mentality of so many to be more accepting. We don't have a large Muslim community in Fort Lauderdale, but we have a large Muslim community in Broward County. Yeah. And it's tough to create a melting pot when you see the battles go on TV, when in fact in everyday life we go to each other's kids' birthdays, friends, anniversaries. We attend everything. We can't even fathom what is going on in the outside world.
Well, while your kind words are very much appreciated, the truth is, though, when I help to free gay people or black people, I'm also freeing myself. Prejudice hurts those that it's directed at, but it imprisons those that carry it around with them. There is freedom, and plenty of it, for all of us. The hating, and that's all it is. It's hating. When it stops, the person that was a hater, they get more benefit than the person that no longer is hated by them.
Well, that's certainly true, but there has to be an epiphany that one reaches to fully understand that.
You would think, but it doesn't. This is not a difficult epiphany. You look at another human being and you see, they look like me, they act like me, they want the same things, they want to love and be loved, they want to have a nice life, they want to have all the things. There are no degrees of separation. And when people get hung up on the fact that, and maybe it's because I'm older, but think about it. How much time do you actually spend in bed having sex compared to the rest of the minutes in the day?
I assume that's a rhetorical question.
That's a rhetorical question. But my point being is, to have that be a dividing factor is just ridiculous.
I agree. Well, Howard, thank you so much for being part of our show tonight. You were a tremendous guest, and your voice is clear and thought-provoking, and I really appreciate your coming tonight. I know you had so much on your plate. You have a lot of people to handle in your job and the responsibilities that you do. But I appreciate your coming. Enjoy the holiday as it approaches, and thank you again for being here.
Dean, thank you, and good luck to you.
Thank you.